Lenore Lenny Maxwell tugged at her thrift store denim jacket, a nervous habit she'd picked up since starting at Crestwood Academy. Barely scraping 5'2", with a cascade of auburn braids perpetually escaping their ties, and eyes that seemed too big for her face, she'd learned that blending in was the only way to survive at the sprawling Gothic-style Crestwood Academy. The place, a stone behemoth with echoing halls and a student body that seemed to have stepped out of a catalogue, was her personal purgatory since her mum's new job transferred them from rural Maine. She gripped the strap of her messenger bag, its canvas worn soft with age, as she navigated the throng of chattering students. Sunlight, fractured by stained glass windows, painted the flagstone floors in shifting hues as her worn boots thudded softly with each hurried step. Her usual refuge beckoned, the old music room tucked away in a forgotten corner of the West Wing, where she could lose herself in composing. "Well, look what the wind blew in." The voice, coated in honeyed menace, made Lenny's blood run cold. She recognized the smooth tones of Chase Huntington, Crestwood's reigning golden boy, towering at 6'4", with perfectly coiffed raven hair and the easy confidence of someone who'd never known hardship. Chase held court wherever he went. His designer bomber jacket sat effortlessly on his broad frame, and his hazel eyes held a mocking light that made Lenny's stomach churn. Bookending him were his ever-present shadows. Frankie the Fixer, Moretti, a thick-set bruiser with a perpetually furrowed brow, and Ricky the Rat DeMarco, whose slicked-back hair and snide grin screamed trouble. Together, they formed an impenetrable wall, blocking Lenny's path. "Still skulking around, little sparrow?" Chase drawled, his voice dripping with false concern. "Still hiding under all that fabric?" Lenny's heart hammered against her ribs. She tried to slip past, but Frankie smoothly cut her off. Students slowed, sensing the impending drama, but no one dared interfere. Chase ran this place, and everyone knew it. "Just trying to get to the music room," Lenny mumbled, her voice swallowed by the din. "What was that, Sparrow? Didn't quite catch it over your style choices," Chase said, feigning deafness. "Maybe if you dressed less like you raided a dumpster, people might actually want to hear what you have to say." Ricky snickered, and Frankie cracked his knuckles. The sound made Lenny flinch, a reaction that seemed to invigorate them. What they didn't know, what nobody at Crestwood knew, was that Lenny had been training in Sistema, the Russian martial art, since she was a kid. Her grandfather, a former Spetsnaz operative, had taught her to use her size and agility to exploit an opponent's weaknesses. For years, she'd practiced, learning to redirect force, to use an attacker's weight against them, to strike with unsettling speed. But she couldn't use it, not here, not against other students. Her grandfather had instilled in her that Sistema was for survival, not settling petty squabbles. "Control yourself, Sparrow," he'd said countless times. "Avoid the fight if you can, but if they corner you, make them regret it." So she endured. Day after day, week after week, she stifled her instincts, telling herself they'd eventually get bored, that they'd find someone else to torment. She was wrong. The incidents began subtly. Chase would accidentally knock her sheet music from her hands in the hallway, sending pages fluttering across the floor like fallen leaves as students stepped over them. Frankie would bump into her with enough force to send her sprawling against the cold stone walls. Ricky would make cutting remarks about her playing, each barb carefully calculated to wound. The dining hall became a gauntlet. Lenny learned to time her arrival, waiting until Chase and his crew were already seated before venturing in. She'd grab a roll and try to find a quiet table, hoping for a moment of peace. But peace was a rare commodity. "Hey, Sparrow!" Chase's voice echoed across the hall during lunch on one particularly brutal Wednesday. "Why don't you come join us? We promise not to chirp too loudly." The entire room turned as Lenny froze, her half-eaten roll clutched in her hand. Heat flooded her cheeks as dozens of eyes bored into her, waiting for her reaction. She could feel her hands trembling as she set down her food. "I'm fine here, thanks," she managed, her voice shaky but audible. "Oh, but I insist," Chase said, pushing back his chair. "Frankie, Ricky, be good enough to escort our little songbird over here, would you?" The two moved with practiced ease, their smiles predatory. Lenny's muscles coiled, her body instinctively tensing, ready to react. She forced herself to relax, to unclench her fists. She couldn't fight. Not here. Not now. As Frankie and Ricky advanced, she grabbed her bag and fled toward the exit, leaving her lunch untouched. Their laughter followed her, a mocking chorus that lingered long after she'd found refuge in an empty art studio. Mr. Abernathy, the art teacher, glanced up from his easel, his brow furrowed with concern. "Lenore, everything all right, dear?" "I'm fine," Lenny lied, sinking into a chair by the window. "Just wanted to do some sketching before class." Mr. Abernathy studied her for a moment, his kind eyes seeing more than she wanted to reveal, but he simply nodded and turned back to his painting. It was the same response she got from all the teachers. They saw what was happening, but nobody wanted to get involved. It was easier to look away, to pretend that teenage cruelty was just a rite of passage. The gymnasium was another torture chamber. During compulsory athletics, Chase would accidentally send basketballs hurtling toward her head during drills, the leather spheres connecting with jarring thuds that left her head spinning. Coach Riley would blow his whistle and chalk it up to clumsiness, but the smirk on Chase's face told a different story. "Butterfingers, Sparrow," he'd say with fake sympathy. "Maybe stick to humming." If only he knew about her reflexes. If only he knew that she could catch those balls and send them back with enough force to knock him off his feet. But she gritted her teeth and rubbed her aching arms, saving her anger for her practice dummy at home. The locker room was the worst. Away from the watchful eyes of teachers, Chase and his cronies felt free to escalate their harassment. They would hide her clothes while she showered, forcing her to search frantically while wrapped in a threadbare towel. They would jam the combination on her locker, leaving her stranded. Once, they filled her bag with shaving cream, ruining her notebooks and scores. Through it all, Lenny remained silent. She cleaned up the messes, replaced her belongings, and tried to convince herself that ignoring them would make them lose interest. But bullies thrive on reactions, and her distress only fueled them further. The breaking point came on a blustery Thursday afternoon in late October. Lenny was walking to her locker after choir practice, her mind focused on the upcoming concert and the brief escape it offered from the daily torment. She was thinking about the new Systema drills her grandfather had shown her the previous weekend, complex sequences that required perfect timing and precise movements. She didn't notice Chase and his crew waiting by her locker until it was too late. "There she is," Chase announced loudly, drawing the attention of nearby students. "The Phantom of the Opera herself." Lenny approached cautiously, her key ready to quickly open her locker and grab her things. But as she reached for the lock, Frankie's hand snaked out and clamped around her wrist. "Not so fast, Sparrow," he growled. "We need to have a little chat." "Let go of me," Lenny said, trying to wrench her arm free. But Frankie's grip was like iron, his fingers digging into her skin. "You know what I think?" Chase stepped closer, his presence intimidating. "I think you're hiding something. Nobody's that pathetic without a reason." "Maybe she's got a birthmark the size of Rhode Island under that jacket," Ricky suggested with a cruel laugh. "Maybe that's why she's always covered up." Chase's eyes gleamed with malicious curiosity. "Is that it, Sparrow? Are you hiding something under there?" Before Lenny could react, Chase's hand shot out and grabbed the front of her jacket. The denim tightened as he yanked at it, trying to pull it open. Lenny's hands flew to her jacket, trying to hold it closed, but Chase was stronger and more determined. "Stop it!" she cried, her voice cracking with a mix of fear and fury. "Leave me alone!" But Chase didn't stop. If anything, her distress seemed to embolden him. He pulled harder, the fabric straining. Students began to gather, forming a circle around the confrontation. Some pulled out their phones, ready to record the spectacle. "Come on, Sparrow," Chase taunted, his fingers twisted in her jacket. "What are you so afraid of showing us?" That's when Lenny saw her. Maya Rodriguez stood at the edge of the crowd, her dark eyes filled with concern. Maya was everything Lenny wasn't. Outgoing, confident, popular. Her long, wavy black hair framed her face, and her smile could melt glaciers. They had been partners in history class for the past month, and Maya had always been kind, treating her like a person, not a project. "Chase, stop it," Maya said, pushing through the onlookers. "Leave her alone." Chase's grip on Lenny's jacket loosened slightly as he turned to face Maya. Well, if it isn't Saint Maya, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when you're harassing someone who can't defend themselves," Maya retorted, her voice unwavering. Chase's expression darkened. "You know what, Maya? Maybe you need a little lesson too." He released Lenny's jacket and moved toward Maya, his intentions clear. The crowd held its breath, anticipating the fallout. Maya stood her ground, but Lenny could see a flicker of fear in her eyes. And that's when something inside Lenny broke. Years of training, months of abuse, and a lifetime of being told to avoid confrontation suddenly evaporated. Chase had crossed the line by threatening Maya, and Lenny wasn't going to let him hurt the only person who had shown her kindness. "Get away from her," Lenny said, her voice carrying a chilling edge that made Chase pause. He turned back to her, a sneer twisting his lips. "Oh, look. The little sparrow found her claws. What are you going to do about it, freak?" Chase lunged at Lenny, his hand reaching for her jacket again. But this time, she was ready. Time seemed to slow as her training kicked in. She could see the arc of his movement, the gaps in his defense, the perfect moment to counter. Her hand shot up and deflected his arm, redirecting his momentum. Chase stumbled, surprised. Before he could recover, Lenny stepped in close, using his weight against him, and executed a swift leg sweep. Chase went down hard. "What the hell?" Chase began, but Lenny wasn't finished. She moved forward, her small frame radiating an unexpected power. "I said get away from her." Frankie and Ricky moved to surround her, but Lenny was already calculating angles and distances. When Frankie swung, she ducked under his arm and used a joint lock, sending him sprawling. Ricky hesitated, clearly rethinking his life choices, but Chase's enraged roar spurred him into action. Ricky charged, a clumsy brute. Lenny sidestepped and used a hip throw, sending him crashing to the floor. The crowd gasped, phones recording every second. Chase stared at his fallen comrades in disbelief before turning back to Lenny, fury contorting his face. "You little," he snarled, balling his fists. "I'm going to make you pay for that." Chase's punch was fast and powerful, but Lenny had been expecting it. She weaved, letting his fist pass harmlessly by her head, then grabbed his extended arm and applied a wrist lock. Chase cried out in pain as Lenny increased the pressure, forcing him to his knees. "You want to know what I'm hiding?" Lenny said, her voice cold and steady. "I'm hiding the fact that I could have ended this months ago. I'm hiding the fact that I know how to hurt people, and I chose not to because I thought you were just pathetic." She tightened her grip, and Chase whimpered. "But you just made a mistake. You threatened someone I care about, and now I'm done playing nice." Chase tried to break free, but Lenny's grip was unbreakable. She had him completely at her mercy, and everyone in the hallway could see it. The invincible Chase Huntington, king of Crestwood Academy, was on his knees and helpless. "Please," Chase begged, his arrogant mask shattered. "Please, I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone." For a moment, Lenny felt the temptation to inflict pain, to make him suffer for every insult, every act of cruelty, every moment of fear he had inflicted. She could feel the power surging through her, the knowledge that she could break his arm with a simple twist. But she didn't. Instead, she looked down at him with something akin to pity. "I'm not going to become you," she said softly, but if you ever touch me or Maya again, if you ever hurt anyone who can't defend themselves, I won't be so merciful next time. She released him, and Chase scrambled back, clutching his arm. Frankie and Ricky were already struggling to their feet, their faces flushed with humiliation and pain. "Are you okay?" Maya appeared at Lenny's side, her eyes shining with admiration and relief. "I'm fine," Lenny said, suddenly aware of the silence. The hallway was still, save for the sounds of Chase and his followers retreating, their reputations tarnished. "That was incredible," Maya whispered. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My grandfather taught me," Lenny replied, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. "He said I should only use it to protect myself or someone I care about." Maya smiled warmly. "Someone you care about?" Lenny felt her cheeks flush, but she nodded. "Yeah, someone I care about." The crowd began to disperse, students buzzing with excitement about what they had just witnessed. The story would spread through the school like wildfire, but for once, Lenny didn't mind being the center of attention. In the days that followed, Crestwood Academy felt different. Chase and his crew avoided Lenny, their eyes downcast whenever they crossed paths. The casual cruelty that had once defined them was replaced by furtive glances and hushed conversations. Other students began to approach Lenny with newfound respect. Some wanted to know about her training. Others simply wanted to be near the girl who had taken down Chase Huntington. She found herself invited to sit at different tables, included in conversations she had once been excluded from. But the most significant change was her connection with Maya. What had started as history partners had blossomed into something more. They spent their free periods together, talking about everything from their favorite music to their hopes for the future. Maya had a way of making Lenny feel seen and accepted, not just for her fighting skills, but for who she was as a person. "I always thought you were interesting," Maya confessed one afternoon as they sat in the courtyard, sharing a bag of chips. "But I didn't know how to approach you. You seemed so closed off." "I was protecting myself," Lenny said, watching a group of students practice with the school's fencing team. "I've been the new kid enough times to know that it's easier to be invisible." "But you stood out anyway," Maya pointed out, "just not in the way you expected." Lenny smiled, thinking about how much her life had changed in such a short time. "My grandfather always said that sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in, even when you're scared." 2 weeks after the confrontation, Lenny was surprised to find Chase waiting by her locker after school. He looked deflated, his shoulders slumped, and his usual arrogance replaced by a nervous demeanor. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice subdued. Lenny studied him, her hand instinctively reaching for her bag. "What do you want, Chase?" "I wanted to apologize," he said, the words tumbling out. "What I did to you, what we did, it was wrong. I know that now." "You know that now?" Lenny echoed, her voice skeptical. "You didn't know it was wrong when you were doing it?" Chase's face flushed. I don't know what I thought. I guess I liked feeling powerful, and you were an easy target. But seeing you stand up for yourself, seeing how strong you are, it made me realize how pointless I was being." "Apologizing doesn't undo months of harassment," Lenny said firmly. "It doesn't erase the fear or the humiliation." "I know," Chase nodded. "I can't take back what I did, but I can promise it won't happen again, to you or anyone else." Lenny considered his words, seeing a flicker of genuine remorse in his eyes. "Actions speak louder than words, Chase. If you really want to make amends, prove it by being better." "I will," he said earnestly. "I promise." As Chase walked away, Lenny felt a burden lift. The confrontation had changed more than just her standing at Crestwood. It had shifted her perception of herself. She had learned that strength wasn't about brute force or physical dominance. It was about knowing your worth, protecting those you care about, and having the courage to stand up for what's right. Maya appeared at her side, having observed the exchange from a distance. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," Lenny replied, surprising herself with the honesty of the answer. "For the first time in a long time, I feel free." They walked out of the school together, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the courtyard. Lenny no longer felt the need to hide in baggy clothes or avoid eye contact with her classmates. She had found her voice, her strength, and something even more precious. She had found someone who saw her for who she truly was. As they reached the gate, Maya reached out and took Lenny's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Want to grab some tea? I know this cozy little place near the square." Lenny smiled, feeling the warmth of Maya's touch and the promise of what lay ahead. "I'd like that very much." The legend of the quiet girl who fought back would echo through the halls of Crestwood Academy, whispered among future generations of students who heard tales of the day everything changed. But for Lenny, it wasn't about becoming a legend. It was about finding the courage to be herself, to protect what mattered, and to never let anyone dim her light again. She had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from crushing your enemies, but from choosing compassion when you have the power to inflict pain. In showing mercy to Chase when she could have easily broken him, she had proven that strength and empathy could coexist, that standing up for yourself didn't require sacrificing your humanity. The bullies had grabbed her jacket and shouted, expecting her to shrink back as she always had. Instead, she had pushed back against their cruelty and discovered something far more valuable than revenge. She had discovered herself. Character count: 21,408.